You're listening to the newest member of the 210 Podcast Network, the It's a Guy Thing podcast. Join Mike, Rick, and Mario as we discuss the things we love in life, the things we hate, and all the stuff in between. You're listening to It's a Guy Thing podcast. This is Mario.
This is Rick.
This is Michael.
So,
let's get it on.
And for our listeners in Qatar,
دعونا الحصول على
All right, guys, so we might as well jump right in and talk about the hot topic of the week. Los Angeles Clippers owner Donald Sterling ousted, banned for life, fined $2.5 million for the exposure of the tape from the conversation with him and an ex-girlfriend, I believe, that basically showed him to have racist commentary as far as who he wanted her to bring to his games, who he wanted her to mix with in circles. And so based on that, Commissioner Adam Silver of the NBA promptly banned him for life, gave him that $2.5 million fine, and then said that he will work with the owners to vote to force a sale of the team. So it brings up a lot of questions. Obviously, nobody thinks racism is okay, at least within reason. There's really no reason why anybody would have something against that. So that's not really the part of the topic to talk about. I mean, I guess you could really kind of dive into that a lot deeper, but
let's go deep.
But the biggest thing is, I guess, addressing some of the stuff that a lot of people have talked about, not really in defense of Sterling, but more of just in an awareness type situation where they're saying, you know, that tape, according to California law, it's illegal to record someone without their knowledge. And, of course, there's debate now on saying, did he actually know or did he not know? Someone said, well, he did know. He was actually having a conversation for a memoir he was writing, which would be pretty ridiculous.
What chapter is that?
Yeah. But if it wasn't, if that's not the case, then we could also go with that he was being recorded without his knowledge. Mm-hmm. The tape was obtained by TMZ and released publicly.
Oh, they're a valuable news source, though, aren't they?
The what?
They're a very valuable news source, though, aren't they?
I mean, it's basically what, paparazzi for TV?
Yeah.
Is that the right? So
entertainment television, kind of.
But I don't think they're as off base as like National Enquirer. They're basically just reporting celebrity ongoings and stuff. Yeah,
Gossip.
Exactly. So there's that. You know, the issue with how the tape was obtained, and then of course there's the issue with whether it's a private entity like the NBA, which is a private club, private organization, or a government organization or an institution. You know, is there something to be said about being able to force somebody to sell their property, sell their assets? So, you know, this has been a hotbed topic for all the sports pundits, and even outside of that, you know, CNN has been addressing it, talking about, you know, a lot of the stuff where, you know, this man is basically now, by being banned for life, he's not allowed to step onto the premises of the Clippers. He's not allowed to conduct any business activities, any player personnel decisions, basically forcing him to be in a situation where if he doesn't sell, he would have to be an absentee owner sitting at home and has no interaction whatsoever with his team. So the NBA basically felt, and the commissioner basically felt, that the commentary he made as far as that, and you can look it up on YouTube or whatever like that, you can go and just type in, you know, Donald Sterling racist comments. I don't know how you want to look it up, but you can listen to that whole conversation, and it's pretty telling. It's not really an ambiguous type situation of his opinion and his views. So the question then is, you know, should things like that, should racism be legal at this point, or is it just if you're a public entity, if you're a public persona, then whether that stuff is acquired properly or not, you know, you could address that he was recorded illegally or improperly or whatever like that. But even if that happens, right, once that gets made public, you are now accountable for your personal thoughts, your personal views, regardless of how that works.
So this is the thing. I mean, I think it's a valid thing as a conversation piece. Obviously, whenever you talk about racism or things like that, it's always a touchy subject, and you know, you can go different directions with it. But just generally speaking, I think that the kind of issue it raises, though, is like you said. I think that's kind of the main thing. Is everybody has thoughts, right? I mean, we make the assumption, especially in situations like this, that we're all moral people and that we all think good thoughts all the time, and that we're all politically correct because we live in an age when you should be, and all of that. And that's the ideal. That's what we'd like to think. But this is something like this. I think that's why it's such a big deal when this happens now. Is that not that it should or is such a surprise that there are people that are racist. I think when we actually have to like deal with it to some degree in our face, where you have to develop an opinion about it, suddenly that's the issue, because then you're confronted with your own, moral scale and your own moral compass, and then you're forced to kind of deal with that, and then either ignore it or make it a conversation piece or make it a joke or make it comedy or whatever. And I think that's the thing that, to me, that's the more important part of the conversation. I mean, again, like you said, racism is bad. Like, if you think racism's okay, you're a dickhead. Like, it's pretty cut and dry in this day and age, and ever. Let's not even say in this day and age. It's not like we're more illuminated now. Like,
it was never acceptable.
It was never cool to be a dickhead. And let's just call it that. It's like you're racist or you're classist or you're sexist, whatever it is. And that's the issue. Whether you're a homophobe, a racist, a classist, or a sexist, you're still a fucking dick. Because I think as a whole, most people are born, hopefully, with some sort of moral compass that tells you that you know when you're hurting people, you know when you're doing wrong, you know when you're going against kind of the greater nature of your own, of your own soul. At least that's what I think. But I guess that's what I'm saying, that the bigger topic here is being faced with that issue. Is that, I'm pretty sure between the three of us and between all the people you interact with, whether it's on a daily basis or a monthly or yearly, you come across casual racism.
Oh, yeah.
In this day and age. Whether it's us as, guys of Mexican American descent or Hispanic or Latino, whether it's us making jokes about it amongst ourselves because we feel like it's okay, because it's a part of our culture and it's a part of our own experience. So within the confines of comfort and among people it's okay to talk about it that way. The same way within African American culture, there's certain words and lexicon that they can use that's allowable in certain social situations, and the same goes, I guess, for any other culture or ethnicity. So I think that's the big thing, is that's the question we're kind of faced with. I guess whenever stuff like this happens, the race kind of stuff comes up. I always think of that scene in Office Space in the beginning, because that's kind of like the kind of the compass for these situations. Is like there's that beginning scene in Office Space where Michael Bolton's driving in his car. And he's, what I'm talking about? And he's rapping. He's listening to like the Ghetto Boys or whatever it is. And he's like rapping, and he's, busting out, dropping N-bombs left and right. And he's got the window rolled down. And of course, an African American guy walks by, and he's like, ugh,
and he turns the volume down.
He turns the volume down and rolls up the window and starts mouthing the words. But that's the thing. It's like that's that social trigger of, okay, this is where the lines crossed, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not even him being racist. It's him embracing the type of music that he enjoys. I mean, we're in the spirit of a fictional movie, of course. But who doesn't do that? I mean, I'm not a big hip hop person, but I would imagine guys that aren't of African American descent that love hip hop, that know all the words, feel comfortable in the space of their own car or home dropping these words. But again, that's the issue, is now would they feel comfortable dropping those same words in the presence of other people that they don't know?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Or the people that could be easily offended by it.
And look at the way the film Crash brought all of that to light, with multiple cultures, with multiple racial interactions, about the way I guess that movie was trying to speak for the general public, about the way the general public would see each other, through each other's eyes, and how we instantly have, these predetermined views and stuff like that. And I think it was, is it Ludacris? Is he?
Yeah, he's in that.
He's in it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
His commentary about, how unfairly, black guys are stereotyped, and how it's not fair for them, and they're wearing certain kinds of clothes, and they're in a certain kind of neighborhood right before their characters commit armed robbery, right? And I think it's really neat, because that film kind of opens it up, and especially like the Ryan Phillippe character as well, and his interaction with Don Cheadle's brother. I think it's one of those things where even the best people, even the most morally sound people, like you said, the people that have that near perfect moral compass, that don't see color as sort of a thing that matters as far as who your friends are or how you interact with anybody.
Yeah.
If anything, I think more people want to embrace that diversity, but there's so many things that still make it something we are forced to talk about, because they'll say, if a Latino or a black person gets into a certain position of power, it's not just congratulations to so and so. It's first black person to do this, first Latino person to do this. They bring attention to it.
Right.
So it's like, on one hand, we're celebrating it, but we're also making it an aware thing that, these minorities, this section of people are, I don't know what to say, like behind or not, filling enough of these positions, where, like, even Adam Silver said, the NBA commissioner, he was saying how now all these celebrities and different groups of people are like lining up to buy the Clippers once Sterling's forced to sell the team, including like Floyd Mayweather, Oprah Winfrey. And Oprah Winfrey said she just wants to be part of the buyers group just so that there's an important person of not only black descent but also female, just for the sake of it being in the history books, that's there. And Adam Silver's like noting a couple of people that are minority owners or majority owners that are not white people, basically saying, we have this excellent diversity and we want to continue to see that happen. Mm-hmm. And it reminds me a lot too of like American History X, where Ed Norton's character, his father, that flashback scene where Ed Norton's father is shown to be very subtly racist until he brings up certain things and he starts talking about, how he's a fireman, right? And he's like, here's this guy who gets the job over another guy because he had a lower score, but they were trying to diversify. So now I've got a guy watching my back who's
less skilled
than the other guy. And it's like, America's supposed to be a best man for the job and blah, blah, blah. And then you start getting into, well, testing is culturally biased and blah, blah, blah. So it feels like it's never going to go away. And every time you fill out a job application, your ethnicity is something you fill out, and collegiates fill out scholarship applications that have all of that on there. So it feels like it's never really going to go away, no matter how morally sound we are. We're just sort of forcibly made aware of that.
I think that's my problem with kind of catching up with this story and stuff and reading about it, is that's what's kind of frustrating about it, is that again, we know that there are racist people. We know that there's a lot of old school rich white people. I mean, this guy, as we know, he had a history of this type of
absolutely
of outspokenness and this type of kind of belligerence towards other ethnicities and stuff. So it's not a surprise. But now that it's a media story, I never even, honestly, and you know that because I'm not a basketball fan, I didn't even know who the guy was until the other day.
Right.
But
Same
yet,
here.
The things that he's done in the past, from what I've read, are just as awful as whatever's on that tape.
But who's going to speak up for them? Who's going to get in front of a microphone and speak for the poorly treated apartment tenants?
But that's the thing, is here he is, speaking poorly about African American and Hispanic tenants of his whatever these apartment complexes are. And that's not a big name story unless you're in litigation with them or involved in that somehow, or somehow it touches your life. Suddenly we're talking about big time sports and celebrities and Magic Johnson, all these people, where suddenly it's more of an issue now, where it's, and that's the thing. It's like, I don't want to say that, I don't want to come across as being untactful, crappy about it, but it's like, things that people, once people go, okay, it's okay to embrace this topic and throw my opinion in there and to be all pissy and kind of try to stand in solidarity with these these poor basketball players who have to play under the reign of this racist person, and that's when I'm kind of getting to okay, let's be realistic. These people exist everywhere. Yeah. They might be your relatives or even your friends or people that you work with, and it doesn't have to be someone who's doing horrible, overt racial things. It's as simple as saying certain things or acting certain ways or reacting certain ways when people are around them. And you're aware of it. We're all aware of it. We've had, whether it's family members or whatever throughout your life, people make those kind of comments or statements, and you're like, wow, where's the line? When do I say something, or how do I react to that?
Right,
how do I, on a personal level, deal with it? And that's fine, because that's something that we as people have to kind of figure it out on our own as we walk those paths. If one or both of you was a racist person, for example, and we were hanging out and you start dropping, different racial epithets and all these shitty things, that's on me to, at some point, make a decision okay, am I going to go along with it? Or am I going to joke along with you? Am I going to say something? Or am I going to ignore it? Or do I remove myself from the situation? And that's a choice that, each individual has to make. But I think when it gets overblown, like so many things in the media do, where everyone's kind of it's you're with us or against us type of personality, or type of scenario, then that's when it gets kind of ugly and murky for me. I mean, the reality is, we were talking about earlier, it's if you want to be blunt, if you want to be gross about it, it's like this is a team of, I'm imagining, mostly African American professional, athletes.
Right.
That's owned by a white man.
Right.
The team itself is owned. They're employed by a white man.
Right.
Correct.
And of course, some of these stories that are spilling out now is all these, assistants and administrative people involved in the organization for all these years knew how this man was, knew how he operated, knew how he treated them, kind of sat under the dictatorship of that and bore the brunt of his shittiness, and now they're like, well, yeah, that's the way it was. See, and everybody knows now how horrible it was. And it's like I was telling you earlier, and honestly, like, my sympathy for that part of it is like kind of like, no, fuck you. Like, if you work for somebody who's a shitty person and a racist and treats people horrible, and 10 years down the road or 5 years down the road, once your career is nice and set and you're making you're living in LA. Let's be real.
And he's the one signing your checks.
Right, that man's signing your checks, and you can't. To me, that's like it kind of. I'm not saying you don't have a right to be disgruntled or the right to be, in a kind of moral quandary, but at the same time, you probably were faced with that every single day of your
sold your soul a little bit.
Exactly. You can't say, well, and their big thing is like, well, we weren't a part of that. Like, we just had to do it because that's our job, and we didn't say anything bad. But it's like,
but allowing it to happen.
It's like that's like being a freaking German soldier in the freaking Nazi army and saying, "Well, I wasn't, I wasn't in the SS. I just did what they told me, and I didn't." Blah, blah, blah.
Followed orders.
It's like no, like that's the part that's really difficult for me to wrap my head around when we're talking about the bigger scope of this conversation right now. Because again, racism, bad, easy. That's not. It's a no-brainer. Let's get past that. It's that larger thing, and like you said, now like Oprah and these other people kind of running into champion, like, yeah, let's buy this team for whatever. I don't want to like go too far with that, but whatever. But at the same time, it's like, no, it's like there's how many basketball teams are in the NBA?
30.
Okay, there's 30. In the NFL, there's 32 teams?
Right.
Okay, now let's just dance around the idea that probably this guy, Sterling, right?
Right.
Out of 63 professional teams, right? NBA, NFL, whatever. Was he the only racist, rich white man who owns a professional sports team? Is that possible? Is it possible that he's the only one out of all these people let's even talk about if any of those teams have minority owners. Now, again, you may be a minority and still be racist.
Right.
So that's the issue, is that like people are saying like, oh, this guy's the racist, let's get rid of him, let's do all this. It's like, no, like let's talk about the grander issue of racism, if that's what you want to talk about. And for me, a big part of that conversation always has to be classism. That goes straight in there with it. You know, when you're talking about the disparity between rich and poor people and the working class and the upper class and whatever. And that's the thing. So it's like if I'm a diehard Houston Texans fan or a Cowboys fan and I love my team and blah, 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 now tomorrow, and I'm over here on the same pulpit as everyone else saying, oh, this guy's shit, you know, blah, blah, let's wear black it out, man, at the fucking, you know, at the dome or whatever, because that's my statement saying, I'm not racist. I'm up in arms with all the other millionaires around here, you know. No, now if tomorrow, like, someone's like, you know, you see, like, the memes going around now about Jerry Jones, you know, and, like, suddenly, like, if tomorrow Jerry Jones busts out with his own tape, then now you have to reconsider your position from the day before. You know what I mean? And that's the thing, and that's why, I don't know, that's why it's hard for me.
Well, and it feels like it's one of those things where if there was no TMZ and no social media and no TV and no radio, then it would make a difference. It's because it's something that gets out to the masses. Now you're forced to take up that cause. And like you were saying, everybody, you know, not just, you know, people in the organization, but even people outside the Clipper organization have said they knew about that. Even Carrie Champion said in her time working in L.A., nice. Even she said that it was a well-known fact. It was just never reported. And that's kind of the thing. It's like, well, why? Because who's going to stand up for them? And it kind of made me think about if Sterling's tape had come out and it wasn't racist comments towards, you know, black people or other minorities, because he did say the word minorities as well. If he was, you know, anti-homosexual or
anti-Semitic,
anti-Semitic or something like that, would the same people that were twittering and going all up in arms with the Golden State Warriors, you know, have threatened to boycott the game? Their plan, the Clippers' opponent, the night before Adam Silver announced the sanctions, their plan was to do the warm-ups, go to tip-off, and as soon as the ball was tipped up in the air, walk off the court. If they didn't like the punishment, if they were not happy with what Silver brought down as
they're also not
going to
cash their checks that week.
Right. So
Yeah.
I'm like, if his commentary had been not specifically to their culture, to their class, would everybody have felt the same? Or would it have just been oh, that sucks. Oh, that's, that's not appropriate. Or would it have been the same way, the way LeBron James is saying, people like that, we can't have them in our league. He needs to be out immediately. And it brings up another question too, is, now they're going to talk about the owners. They need a 3/4 majority to vote him in a situation where he has to forcibly sell his team. And I wonder, Sterling is a former lawyer himself,
scary.
and he likes being in litigation. But it is scary, not because it's not right what he did. Like we said, we've already knocked out that fact. It's reprehensible. And if you're a person of public figure or whatever like that, no matter how it's acquired, it's not a courtroom. The court of public opinion is not the same as being in a courtroom about, the way evidence is obtained, stuff like that. This is just, if you're in the, if I show up into your bedroom tonight, Rick, and I record conversations against your will, I'm violating your rights. I'm morally reprehensible myself. But if the stuff you're saying, could come back, could come back to hurt you if you were running for public office or something like that, you're going to be in worse shape than I am. People are going to almost look at me as a hero for bringing it to light, even though I violated your privacy. And of course, there's another side of people that will say, well, he violated his privacy. Is there no more privacy in America? And I think we're sort of getting over that reality, is that there really is no more privacy. Maybe that part is kind of out, and it's forcing people to say, if you're going to hold reprehensible beliefs and reprehensible morals and stuff like that, then it better just be something you keep to yourself for
forever.
Right? Yeah.
No matter what.
Right.
Because that is scary. I mean, like, again, this is a topic that has to come up because we live in this age now. Like, and I'm jumping on your bandwagon with what we're talking about privacy and living in the digital age, where you could easily right now turn the memo on your phone and record everything we say easily, or off the show and record some of the shit we talk about,
right? And
then turn around and go, oh yeah, fuck you guys, I'm gonna get you, whatever. And that's the thing. It's like that's what's living in this age of this guy and the Twitter and the blah 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 and Ed Snowden and the NSA. You can throw all this stuff together because it broaches the same topics. What are the boundaries? Are the boundaries gone? Are the boundaries extending? Are they elastic now? And that's, I don't know. There's so much of that that's just ugly, and I think it's nowadays. It's too easy to become a hypocrite for anybody, for any of us. Yeah. I mean, for me, for anyone. You know what I mean? Because you have to very, very carefully walk that line, especially if you're going to be in the public eye, especially even here on this podcast. I mean, I'm sure we're gauging our words because of the type of topic it is, and that's the thing. Is like, what if and this is a question for you, talking about the NBA stuff, is that now, because of what this guy said, which for all intents and purposes what we're talking about is he said racist things and was captured on video, and it pissed a lot of people off and affects a lot of money,
audio,
TV, markets, blah, 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 all this stuff. So now you have to, in a politically correct way, come up with the proper solution to deal with that, to show that we don't support that. The NBA doesn't support that, so this is the levy that we're going to throw on you.
Right.
Okay? So now let me ask you this. So say Kobe Bryant or LeBron James, or I'm trying to think of anybody's name I know, Dirk Nowitzki, whoever.
Sure.
If a audio tape comes up of one of these guys using the same type of language, talking about the same things, because these guys have real estate holdings and businesses and all these things on the side. Now, if a tape comes up of Tim Duncan talking about his car shop and the people that work there, or Tony Parker and his club, or whatever, anybody, I'm just using anyone as an example,
sure,
because the extremes of that are significant. Now, how would the NBA react to that? If Kobe Bryant comes out and he's talking bad about white people or Jewish people or Hispanic people, how does the NBA respond?
It sounds like now, and it's a great question, because I was going to leave you with the thought of I was reading a different article that was written by a lawyer in Nevada who was basically saying, he said, I don't agree with anything Sterling said, but I also don't agree with what the NBA did to him, because they're violating his rights and his constitutional rights and blah, 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 as far as his assets are concerned, forcing him to sell an asset because of his beliefs. And this lawyer was citing the NBA's owner's bylaws that said, and he said, I read it cover to cover, and he said, in the NBA owner's bylaws, there are only a few stipulations where they can vote to force someone to sell, and the only stuff that's in there is for financial insolvency and other financial stuff. There's nothing in there about moral turpitude. And so he said he felt like it was purposely written that way because there's other places where it is written for other stuff, for other type of sanctions. And the players also have moral turpitude clauses for different things. And some contract to contract, the agent will, and the team will have a contract for certain guys that they know, like someone that's adventurous will have like a, if you can't ride a motorcycle and stuff like that. And so they can nullify your contract if you're injured for certain things like that. And so to answer your question, it feels like now this specific league has not only set a precedent for its own league, but for the other sports leagues.
And it's scary. It's scary. I mean, because like we were, talking pre-show about like the Riley Cooper from the Eagles.
Right.
Riley Cooper had a very similar situation. We're talking about a white receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles who was caught on video and audio using, racial slurs against African Americans at a country music concert.
Right.
And there was a brief amount of, there was a lot of talk about it at the time. It was in the off season, right? Yeah, it was in the off season, last off season. Some of his own teammates were like, "Oh, screw that guy! I don't want anything to do with them." Blah blah. And there was other people that kind of not took his back, obviously, but said, "You know what? We all make mistakes." Michael Vick was one of those people. We all make mistakes, and blah blah blah, whatever, blah blah blah. Well, the guy has a good year, and then is rewarded with a contract extension, right? So how is that? In other words, looking back, retroactively at how the Eagles handled that situation. Okay, we have this guy who is caught on video, audio, using the same type of language. Not only using that type of language, but using it with the threat of violence. Because he was saying, we should go over there and kick these people's asses, blah, 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 blah,
is
blah.
Is it more forgivable for Cooper to have said that and apologize for basically saying, I was wrong, just like Michael Vick was wrong with the dog stuff? Whereas Sterling is held to a higher standard because he's an owner in charge of these people's
I think
whatever.
I think it's the same thing. I mean, he's a professional.
Right.
He represents an organization, a business entity. Things he do. I mean, like you said, those are things in your contracts. I mean, if you're, look at the kind of junk that went on with the receiver Deshaun Jackson, right? So like they kind of, whoever that was that kind of leaked this stuff that the Eagles are getting rid of him because he has gang ties. Now, I mean, if that's not true, that amounts to libel, right?
Right.
Because they're pretty much crapping him out for any other team that that was interested in him. But it's the same thing. It's like, so you have those kind of things where, well, if this person associates with these type of people, or if it's on the other extreme, Aaron Hernandez, who's probably freaking psychopathic, multiple murderer.
Right.
You deal with those things swiftly. But again, that's the same thing. It's like now, like you said, you're setting a precedent. You're opening a big can of worms now, because now you're saying, okay, well, how do you treat that? Is it a case-by-case basis thing? Well, this guy apologized, so that's different. He deserves a second chance. This guy has no remorse, so he deserves a second chance. Or he doesn't deserve a second chance. You know what I mean? How do you determine the difference between, someone using racial slurs, being very clear about the intent of those words, not it's slipping out? Okay, let's set that aside, right. Because I don't think there's, whatever. You know what I mean? We're not talking about slips of the tongue. We're talking about very consciously, very awarely using those types of words in a certain way to cause a specific response or, awareness in other people. So that's the thing. It's like, how do you separate the threat of violence with racism between casual racism or possible gang ties or possible drug use or possible murder? You know what I mean? Like you're opening up a big can of worms, because it's not even that's not even touching on the topic of homophobia in the NFL, right? Because that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
Now, now they open again. I have no problem talking about like the ESPN people and the media people, because they're the ones that bring these stories to light, and then in this kind of like self-flagellating gesture of like we're responsible for this too, but at the same time they're reporting on their own culture of reporting on this stuff and sensationalizing this stuff and making stories about this.
It's still a story.
I mean, like, the show that me and you always love to talk about, like First Take. It's a perfect example of sensationalizing stuff for the sake of it. They do that. They bring that stuff out and talk about it and make a big issue out of stuff. And, is this a racial thing? Is this a whatever? Is this a blah, blah? And, like, it's all about complicity And if you're at any point, you can along that chain of events,
Yeah.
you can find yourself complicit. Then I think whoever you are, you have to take a step back and examine yourself first before
Right.
you can point fingers, before you can make those judgments. Because I don't know. I can't tell you, well, this is what's right or that's wrong, what they did to that guy.
Right.
But I know for a fact that if, like you said, people in the media, other athletes, other people not associated with that organization knew about this person's belief system and his moral direction and the way he treated, and not just the racism stuff, the way he treated people, the way he acted, the way he conducted his business. People were, like I said, people were aware of this for years and years and years, right? So that's the thing, is like there's a subtle complicity in that. Now, it's again, same thing. If I live in LA and there's, for whatever reason, 2 professional basketball teams in the same city, and I choose to go to a Clippers game knowing beforehand, before this was an issue, that the owner was a craphead who had horrible labor relations with his people, treated his people badly, underpaid them, treated them badly, was racist, was shitty and horrible in his other dealings outside of basketball, and I buy a season ticket and I can say, well, no, it's because I love the team. I love Blake Griffin, man. I love seeing him dunk. It has nothing to do with the owner.
Because I think maybe we have a natural built-in apathy for stuff that's not, a galvanized topic that everybody can rally behind. It's just sort of expected. It's a known thing. Well, if a certain guy has certain beliefs that are, not popular, or they, are racist or hate speech or beliefs like that, it's, well, big shocker. There's so much of that. It's no surprise. A lot of people have said, well, this isn't a shocker at all. So as long as it's just sort of a under the table, whisper,
business as usual.
Right. It's not one of those things, but now it's public ownership of the issue. Now the public owns his beliefs, and now the public has, its own court to bring the hammer down.
Right.
So like you were saying, everybody, even if you are an individual who's racist, now you really have to come out and be like, oh, it's horrible. Because that's just sort of the thing. It gives everybody a clean slate to come out and just, completely denounce it.
Yeah.
And again, those practices, go on in a lot larger places where it's affecting people that don't really have, they're dependent on being treated right, and being treated unfairly or being treated poorly through racism affects their lives in a really, really horrific way. Where here it's basically, and I was bringing this up with one of my friends the other day, saying like Chris Paul, he's the point guard for the Clippers, and there's certain cultures that have a built-in, they have a right to basically claim the difficulty of their lives because of what history has put them through, and so black people were enslaved for
Hundreds of years.
Exactly, and completely ridiculously wrongly by our own country. It wasn't like it happened in some other country and we had to travel to go, not we, just whoever had to go and emancipate them, and it was here on this soil, our country's history.
Not very long ago.
Not long ago, not thousands of years ago, very, very recently. And then even after slavery was abolished, then they had to deal with civil rights and segregation, and that was in the 1900s, not 500, 600 years ago, and that's something like I bring up Paul just as one example of, if he has any children, I don't know if he does, but if he does, those children are born, as, into a family of a person who is a millionaire. But he can always tell those children, don't ever forget where you came from. Don't forget your roots. And they can always rally behind what, the ancestry went through. That hardship belongs to them. They will always have that. And so anything that remotely shows, anti-black, anti-anything of their culture is something that everybody can get behind. And rightfully so. That culture deserves that. Where there's some cultures that don't have that. They don't have a history where they were, across the world in the history books treated that way.
I think too. I mean that's where I think you gotta. I say you. I mean the Greens. All of us have to kind of open our eyes and realize that that's one of the things that we do share. That yes, our experiences are different, but in the reality, like most. I'm kind of generalizing, but most cultures have been through their own sorts of tribulations.
Exactly.
And it's easy for us to look at job application or SAT style, like African American, white, non-white, Hispanic, Pacific Islander, whatever. But the reality is, it goes deeper than that. Because I was talking with a friend about that today. I was asking him, I was like, usually you say white people is a kind of encompassing blanket, label. And of course, nowadays, that's like a thing where white people are like, well, no, I'm not white. I'm, German, Scotch, blah,
Welsh,
blah, blah, whatever,
Italian,
And that's perfectly valid because everyone has a right to their identity, their right to their heritage and their culture. At the same time, the same way that we're reclaiming that culture and reclaiming our heritage and being proud of it, or being, using that as part of the foundation of our identities and our children's identities we're passing on to them, we're responsible for understanding the complexity of our own cultures, and not just ours, but other people's. Because it's the same thing. There's plenty of people that are non-Hispanic, non-African American, that are of, whatever you want to call them, white, Caucasian, whatever, if you want to get into the details of it, but that have been oppressed, that have had their own troubles. And, whether it's, the English and the Irish, and you have that. Irish were the slaves before the African Americans were slaves. So you have that sort of thing. You have how the Spanish came and, pulled a genocide on Native Americans. You know what I mean? So that's a whole other thing. And that's something that even for us as Hispanics oftentimes gets lost. Even with the most diehard of brown power people, is that our entire as Hispanics or Mexican Americans or Latinos or Hispanics or whatever anyone out there would like to call us, that's part of our culture, is that the ingrained part of you, unless you're a pure blood Spanish or purely native, you come from a culture of conflict, of war, of
rape and pillaging,
genocide. Exactly. It's like the Spanish didn't come here and fall in love. They came here to do some damage, and we're the result of that.
Well, rewind to the 80s when we were in school, when we were in elementary school, and people were like, "Oh, remember the Alamo?" And that was the problem that I always had, because I was like, "So the Hispanics were bad?" Yes, the Hispanics were bad. Remember the Alamo? Okay, so then I grew up and I learned that Santa Anna was doing this because he didn't want slavery. He disagreed with slavery, and that Texas wanted slavery. So we were on the good side of that.
But
but that's not how it got taught to us.
But even that, even the revisionist version of that is difficult, because there's back and forth sides of that. You know what I mean? It's because it wasn't that, the people from Texas wanted slavery and he was fighting against it. It wasn't the issue. It's at the same level, it's yes, that's a part of it. That's a dynamic of it. But at the same token, it was, you have to throw in there class. You have to throw in there wealth and all these other things that come into it. It's when this was a part of Mexico, they invited people to move to Mexico, and they would give them land and all this stuff. And then once they all showed up, and it's kind of basically reverse immigration from what we're dealing with now, is that all these white people showed up and they're like, whoa, that's too many white people, calm down. And then the white people were like, you know what, we like it here, fuck you, we're going to make this our own country. You know what I mean? And that's the thing. There's plenty of ways to look at it, and I'm glad.
And there's all different versions, too.
Yeah, and I'm glad. I mean, I know people get worked up and angry about it, and whatever. It's not even worth at this point getting angry about. But it's worth talking about. It's worth exploring these things, because there's hopefully there will be a point where these things don't have this undercurrent of bitterness and anger and hurt and pain and suffering. That will always be there. That's always stuff we need to be aware of and be respectful of. But there has to be a point where you can have this conversation without it being an affront to someone else's beliefs or someone else's ideas of what's right and wrong. You can just have the conversation and say, well, this is what I understand. Educate me, explain to me without making me feel stupid, without making me feel like I'm a racist or I'm an uneducated idiot, because that's not how people learn shit. You have to, open the door and let them walk through it. You can't push them through it. You can't shut the door on them. And, not to get too far off the topic, but I think it's not. It's these things are connected regardless of the cultures. It's again, the reason why this is a topic is because we're talking about tons and tons and tons and tons of money and celebrities.
Well, yeah, because the NBA is a brand, and it's their right to protect their brand and stand up for that, so that, at the end of the day, they're doing two things. They are showing their moral fiber, and they're also keeping fans interested and making sure people will continue to shell out money for season tickets and know that we are the good guys. We're on your side. We're fighting for everybody's causes, that it's not tolerated, here, and it shouldn't be tolerated anywhere. And I agree with all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, again, like us being, Hispanic, Latino, all of our heritage and our culture and stuff like that, we have to hear, whenever illegal immigration comes up in the Arizona stuff, that's something that gets hammered to a lot of us, and Johnny, who was one of our guests, he was telling me a story about how when he was first interviewing for a job in Indianapolis, because he does graphic design work, that the guy told him when he saw his name on paper that he was expecting a dark-skinned guy wearing boots and a cowboy hat because he was from Texas and because he was, he had a last name, that was of Spanish descent. And he was joking with him when he shook his hands, like, I was so glad to find out that wasn't, how it was. And he shook his hand, it was like, so, we're really glad to have you, because that was just, that was not what
I thought you were one of those other kind.
I was not, I don't think and actually I'm misspeaking, I don't think he said I'm so glad, he said I was surprised. I was surprised that, better, that was a different thing, yeah. So I didn't mean to improperly frame the situation, but the thing is, and I guess my big ticket item why this is a topic that I care about is, at the end of the day, does this kind of discussion, does us as our little group here, and then all of the giant media outlets with millions of viewers, will this affect any change in a larger sense? Will other people that are harboring these views, these morally reprehensible views, or even, like Rick said, treating people poorly through their views, will they think twice now? Like, man, look what happened to this guy. Maybe I need to, even if these are my views, I need to at least not treat people that way, and I need to not voice them. Because at the end of the day, if you're not voicing it, are you at least making a positive step forward? If you're not treating people badly despite what you think, are you making a step forward in making an effective change? I just wonder about stuff like that.
At least you're not breeding it, I guess, at that point.
Right.
But I almost wonder, like, and that's another can of worms, but I almost wonder, it's like, what's worse, though? Like, if you're, a closeted racist or a homophobe or a sexist or a classist, and you put on this front when you walk out the door and walk into the office and you say, oh, I'm nice to everybody, everybody's great, he's fine, and then you go home and go, ugh, those people. It would be so much better at work if those people weren't there, or these people weren't there, or this is why so-and-so's lazy, or this is why so-and-so got a promotion. Now, if you come home and keep that within the walls of your house, to some degree, there's a, depending on how you choose to characterize that, that could easily be hypocrisy.
But if that person's not teaching it to anybody, to their spouse, friends, or children, it's going to die with them, and that's it.
That is true, but is that the case? Now, if you're a racist and you come home every day and you're surrounded by people that you don't like, of whatever those groups are that I mentioned, and you come home and tell your wife, oh, so and so and so and so and so and so, and between the two of you, and she goes, yeah, you're right, man, that is blah blah blah, and at some point, whether you choose to pass it on or not, your children here, or your friends here, or other people in your house here, and then does that rub off on them, and then they have to make, you know what I'm saying?
No, that's cancerous. That's still perpetuating
that's
that darkness.
That's why I have such an interesting idea about that. No, sorry. I think it's an interesting topic, because now, in the same token, if you work with someone who's a racist or a sexist or homophobe, and that person comes to work and they have no qualms about sending emails or talking at the water cooler or blatantly abusing other people verbally with those types of words, then how quickly is that person going to be fired or cast out or ostracized for their beliefs? Now that's kind of the thing, is like, and then you deal with it that way. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying one is right or one's wrong. I'm just saying, like, what is the real difference between that? If I hate everybody, but I don't tell them I hate them, but then I go home and stew about how much I hate them, and at some point that's going to spill over, whether or not how I treat other people or how I treat my own people that I care about. Somehow or another, it's gonna seep into your life. You can't be a dickhead at heart and contain it forever.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's the thing. It's like, so part of me, it's almost like I've crossed paths at points in my life where I've known people who've been casual racists, right? And we'll say that in the sense that they might drop a word you
Right.
shouldn't drop
Yeah.
for effect. They'll say like, "Hey, look at that," blah blah blah, and they want to they're either making a joke or whatever it is they say, and there's that part for a half a second where they're waiting to see how you like laugh at their joke or respond to their joke or ignore their joke or get mad or whatever.
Well, we'll see, and that's the thing is they give you that half second to react, and they're waiting for a reaction
to make sure it's okay for them to do that. And that's again.
Would that be considerate?
No,
Is
that's
that
that's where
consideration?
complicity comes in because. And I'm not saying you're guilty if you don't say anything or you
Right.
don't stand up to. I'm saying that's where you have to make that moral decision and say, okay, like how do I deal with this? I've been in situations with people I don't know very well where I'm talking to them and they casually drop the normal kind of awful racial slurs that you're aware of, and I go. And I had that mental moment of like, how do I respond to this? I don't know this person that well. But at the same time, I'm insulted as much by the fact that they think it's okay to say that in my presence.
Right.
And I know that, people I've been acquainted with, I'll say it like that. I remember one day I was talking to somebody that I was acquainted with, and they just casually dropped a racial slur. Mm-hmm. And I was like kind of taken aback, and I was like, whoa. And I was like, whoa. And it was like, what? The person was like, what? And I was like, I don't need to hear that. And I'm not saying that was enough or that was the right thing or that was the way to respond, but the fact that I had to make some sort of choice at that moment, and we all do. I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's not like it's something that you can't, at some point in your life, you can't avoid that moment. And I'm not even saying that was a big moment for me or whatever. I'm just saying those things happen. I think we have to be aware of how we feel about that. You know what I mean?
Kind of like what you were saying earlier, though, about going back to the idea that we all kind of participate in it to some degree. Yeah. Even just among our friend group and then families and everything. For those that don't know, my wife is primarily white. I am primarily Hispanic, even though I'm very pale-skinned Hispanic, for all that matters.
And we hate you for it.
And
especially Mike hates you.
And
of course, this is like a brown table, and none of us are even close to the color of the table, so there you go.
True. So, like, I've and I'm not gonna throw anybody under the bus technically, but I've had family members from her side say stuff like, for example, they called Dylan, who looks very white, like way whiter than I do, but he's half me and half Sarah, call him Paco. I'm like, I don't know how to react to that. Like, it's from an older person, and so, like, okay, in my head, I'm making excuses for them, maybe thinking, well, it's a different time, and I know they're not saying it in a hurtful way, and I know that they love him.
Right. So,
am I permissive about it? The other aspect of that,
because really, it's like they're not making fun of him; they're making fun of you.
Right. in a way, yes. I mean, that's true.
Like, we love him because he's our blood, but you're an interloper.
So, and then here's the other side of that. When we were all together, I was holding a couple of friends of ours. I was holding their son, who is very dark complected, and the joke came up that, oh, that looks more like Mario's kid than Mario's actual kid. I mean, for all intents and purposes, that's a racial kind of an issue.
Did it make you cry?
No, I thought it was hilarious, and I laughed. And that was it. But that does that get grouped into this whole thing too? I mean, should it, or?
Well, I think you have to, part of being, not that it's ever okay to be shitty, but your environment, again, like we were talking about earlier, like, if you're among people you're comfortable with and people that, us, okay, we'll use us specifically. We're not talking about other groups.
And Sarah's family was there too, so it's white people and then all of our groups of friends, so Hispanic people. Yeah. And so everybody laughed at it for different reasons or for the same reason.
Yeah.
So from both perspectives of it.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, obviously, we could talk about this for hours and hours because there's no answer because everybody has a different perspective of what is offensive or what's acceptable. Like, real quick, like a little anecdote. Like, I remember I was at work one day, and where I work, there's a lot of Anglo people or whatever, and not where work with me, but that I come into contact with. Right. And I remember one day I was out with these people, and
these people.
Well, I'm not trying to be specific. About who they were, but like two gentlemen that were white.
Okay.
Gentlemen, okay? I don't know what their heritage was, but they were white people, okay? And the guy is telling me, he's talking about something, and in the space of that conversation, he casually, in the same breath as saying the sun or the moon or the rain, he says, "Oh, these blah 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 wetbacks, blah 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 blah," like saying these wetbacks.
Right.
And I remember again, I had those moments where I was like, "Whoa!" Like I took a step back because I thought, okay, like, you know, I don't speak Spanish. I'm not from Mexico. That's pretty obvious, but I'm generally not confused with not being Hispanic.
Right.
Nor,
right.
I mean, I was standing next to my father, who is unmistakably Hispanic when you look at him, you know. But so it was like the thing, but and the fact that and that's what I'm talking about. That's the kind of casual racism I'm talking about, where this person says something, assuming that like, oh, well, you're not like that, so you won't be offended by it.
Yeah.
And the assumption is almost the worst part about it, because you're saying something about you makes you okay as opposed to somebody else.
Right.
And even that acceptance of me is in a form offensive.
Right, exactly.
Because you don't know anything about me. You don't know my situation. You don't know the people I know or my family comes from or my past, you know? So that's the thing. And that's what I'm talking about when you're around people that you don't know, people that... I mean, that's the thing is, like, generally, if you don't know somebody, you respect who they are and you respect their boundaries because you don't know what their boundaries are.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The same way, like, some people aren't huggers, right? Like, some people, like, don't like being hugged by anyone, let alone strangers. You know, and I always think about that because I'm a hugger. I'll hug people generally like that I meet for the first time. I'll like, hey, or usually when I'm saying bye to them, I'll hug them.
Yeah.
And there's people that are probably like, ugh, don't hug me. Like,
yeah, but it's hard.
anybody.
You can't be aware of it. It's
you know, so
difficult
but I
sometimes.
try to be conscious and be like, oh, some people don't like that. You know what I mean? Or whatever. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
I don't know. But it's a great topic, Mike. I mean, because obviously you could mine it for forever because there's just so many aspects and angles that, you know, that we could go with.
Yeah.
But do you have any final thoughts on that?
No, I mean, really, it's really just more about the questions that it brings up, and just, you know, I wonder, you know, it's already starting to die down just as far as media attention because of how fast the sanctions were brought on Sterling,
I
and
think
you know,
maybe it's just covering for 370 because they haven't found 370 yet.
so you
Flashback
know,
to episode 2.
it'll just be interesting to see, you know, over time when another situation comes up, you know, will this have set a precedent? Will businesses start to follow suit too? Just regular private entities, will they be like, well, you know, this well-known sports entity did this, now we have the ability to do that? You know, will we see more lawsuits and things like that?
And that's scary because what if, I mean, you know, and you know the world we live in, people love to litigate, but it's like, you know, it's like, now does this give people ideas to go, oh, I don't like my boss, I'm just going to keep my phone on memo all the time in the event that I catch them saying the wrong thing at the wrong time, and then this business is mine. You know, like, you know, that's horrible, but like, you know, like you're bringing that up, like that's...
Yeah,
it's a nasty can of worms.
And just to mention, for those that want that kind of a world, there's an app called Herd. I actually have it for different purposes, but it but listen, it holds a
of course.
Am I crossing a line? Of course, again.
No,
okay,
you're
so
fine. You're just advertising some racist.
No.
thing.
Okay, so I had to take my dog to the vet, and the vet was telling me some information that I knew I wasn't going to remember. I just have a very bad memory. There's this app called Herd. And I think you pay like 99 cents or $2 or something.
Too much already.
And you get 5 minutes of buffered recording. So it always refreshes itself. So at the end of 5 minutes, you know, it's got the next 5 minutes or whatever. So they were saying something important. I knew I wasn't going to catch it. I turned on the app. And then after they are done saying what they needed to say, I turn off the app, go home, and I'm trying to explain to Sarah, okay, well, this is what the doctor said. Oh, well, what about this? Oh, well, here, let me just play this for you. And I played the 5 minutes. And it worked to our advantage. This is a case of this kind of a thing being a good thing.
Right.
Like, I can understand why that kind of an app would exist.
But that's how stuff pops up on Teams. So say you're recording your veterinarian, right?
Right.
Talking about something. In the space of that, say you've known him a while and you've been his customer for a while and he's treated your dog for a while. He goes, oh, Mario, let me tell you this joke I heard today. And he tells the most awful, despicable joke. Now, say you're the type of person who goes, oh, I like you, you're cool, but you know what? That's shitty. So I think I'm going to release this to the newspaper or to my blog or to wherever.
On the podcast.
You know, and that's the thing. It's like, I don't know. I know we could go on and on about it, but it's interesting. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm saying it's interesting because the age we live in, the digital age, it's like there used to be a time where, you know, telephone That's a perfect example. You play the telephone game, and and between you and 10 people, the message is lost, or the context is lost, or it turns into a joke or whatever. And that was kind of the safety of not having the technology then, because you knew that for good or bad, something's going to get diluted very quickly. In this day and age, it does get diluted, but it's consciously and taken out of context, because that's the power that we give to the technology we have, and the voice that we give to people that's unfiltered, and so I don't know.
Yeah. No, like you said, I mean, we could talk about this. We could revisit this topic once a week.
Obviously, that was a pretty heavy topic. Thanks, Mike, for bringing everybody out there down that listens to this for shits and giggles. But
so this is a serious episode. We were going to talk about some other stuff, but right now we're sitting at about 55 minutes. So I think this will just be the race episode, I think.
Wow, that's heavy. That's
pretty big.
So let's go on something easier.
Well, would I be guilty for playing up the media aspect of calling it the race episode just to get people to download it?
That's nasty. I don't even like that. I don't know.
All right, leverage.
We'll have to take a vote on that then.
Okay, later. So real quick, let's touch on one of the topics we discussed earlier. This feels like there's no transition now.
No, there's no way to transition.
All right,
that.
well.
So we can just,
any other topic now makes you diminish. You're diminishing the importance of.
And we're like associating the next topic with this topic. So it's like, anyways. So I got this. Yeah. All right. Well.
Sorry to kind of have it. Well, I don't think it's a downer episode though. I think it's
interesting, but
I think it's an episode that everybody can contemplate and decide where they stand.
It's just not funny. It's serious.
No. It is.
But it's also something that affects us from every generation, every culture, every age, everything.
And not even culture, like what you were saying about Johnny earlier about them thinking that he was going to come in wearing boots. My automatic thought is, that's how people see Texans.
Right.
So suddenly we're all different races grouped into the same idea because people think we carry around cowboy hats, boots, and a gun.
People are just jealous of Texans. That's the problem. They're not racist towards us. They're jealous of us.
Or the accent.
Yeah. Or the accent,
Oh, and that's funny, real quick. Like, have you ever, I remember talking on the phone one time to this person that through work or whatever, and this person lived in North Texas, and North Texas is kind of like South Oklahoma. And I remember talking to this person. They're like exactly how the kind of stereotypical Texas accent you hear from like movies and stuff, and like not quite howdy, but And I remember going, wow, like that's an accent. I don't have that accent. And I remember going, hi, how's it going? And the person was like, hey, how's it going? They're like, wow, you sound funny. And I was like, you sound funny. like I don't know. It's always interesting, like, to hear that, because I'm like, I don't think I have an accent.
Yeah, well, I don't think anybody does. But
it's just. But,
well, I get that all the time. Like I've been on the phone for a majority of my career in several different businesses, and I always get, where are you from? You sound like you're from the Midwest, or you sound like you're from up north, or you sound like you're from the Northeast. And I'm like, I get so many different places, and I'm like, I'm from Texas. They're like, oh,
gross.
Are you sure? And I'm like,
are you
yes,
sure?
I'm born and raised in San Antonio.
You're in a box.
But then I also get those people that are like, you're in India, aren't you? And I'm like, whatever. Yeah. I don't care.
So, okay, so we'll go ahead and wrap up this thing. But
since it is contemplative, though, I mean, I really kind of, as our audience, what do you guys think? Let us know. Email us. You can call in on our phone line, and that'll be at the end of the episode as well. And leave us a message. Let us know what you think, what you agree with, what you disagree with. What would you have done had you been in charge solely of the decision for how to handle the Donald Sterling situation? Let us know. Thanks for listening, guys.
You can visit us on our home on the web at www.itsaguythingpodcast.com, on Instagram and Facebook at It's a Guy Thing Podcast, and Twitter, It's a Guy Thing Pod. You can find us on iTunes and Stitcher Radio, and we'll be coming soon to many other podcatchers. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in, guys. This is Mario.
This is Rick.
This is Michael.
And you're listening to It's a Guy Thing Podcast. Cut.